father stood outside my window, but he died 5 years ago. At the point when I was youthful, my grandma used to recount the island we lived on. She used to enlighten me concerning the pixies in the tree beat, the spirits under the ocean, the phantoms on the precipices. However, the story that stayed with me all through my life as a youngster were the tales about the evil spirit in the forest, the Nightmaker. She used to episode and puff at whatever point I requested that she recount to me the story. I was excessively youthful, she'd say. I'd have bad dreams and keep her alert. However, she'd yield ultimately. She generally did. The narratives went that there was an evil presence that lived in these woods, a thing who didn't see anything in adoration or family. It would watch us from the dull with derisive eyes for all that was delightful. Individuals who lived close to the woodland must watch out. The Nightmaker had a dark soul, and he would drive all to surrender on the off chance that you let him close. He had such countless stunts, such countless ways of tormenting individuals of the town. No stunt was played 2 times. Indeed, even endurance was adequately not. Meeting him even once would scar you everlastingly, and you will wind up ending your own life. The one thing that generally struck me about the night producer was the way purposeless he appeared. He had no obvious explanation for what he did. All he needed to do was show the residents how terrible the world truly was. Toward the end, fearful little me would be shuddering, and my grandmother would get me into bed. She'd kiss me on my temple and let me know the world was horrible, yet she would show up for me. The elderly person really focused on me. She truly did. On my 10th birthday celebration, she got me an old-fashioned radio. She realized how intrigued I was in dabbling and machines. In the event that I could fix it, she'd give me an award. I believe that pulled in him 3 days after my birthday, after grandmother kissed me. I was getting into my bed when I heard a clamor, a tapping on the window. On my room floor was a sorry excuse for a man. I gazed toward my window. My dad was grinning at me. It had been for such a long time. So for a long time ago, I saw my dad's face. I failed to remember what he even resembled. I thought he was dead. Yet, at that point, I perceived his grin. Come on, youngsters, we need to go to chapel. I didn't have a clue. I didn't mind at all what he was referring to. I got up and opened my window. As I did as such, he held out his hand, alluring me to come outside with him. Perhaps he was taking me to paradise. He held my hand firmly, and I moved out, ensuring I was okay. He hinted at a way in the woods bound on our home. We strolled sluggish, yet I wouldn't fret. I partook in the additional time holding his hands. As we headed into the trees, I heard a song reverberating around us. The singing was coming from deep inside the woodland toward the path we were strolling. It's a decent melody, right? I must have gestured, in light of the fact that his grin became more extensive. It was getting colder as we strolled, and the melody was drawing nearer. Youngsters were singing it. Some, together. The trees were developing more wounds as we strolled, their branches turning out to be more hand-like. Like elderly people, men connect with me. His hold was so tight. His grin continued getting more extensive, extending his skin as he gazed into the dim. I gave slight protection from his steed. Come on, John. We need to get to the congregation. Dad. My name isn't John. His demeanor didn't change. All things considered, his grin got more extensive. He raised one long, extended finger and pointed before us. Check the congregation out. A cavern somewhere out there. A cavern in the forest. It leads down into the earth. His virus hold pulled me as he led me, as I lingered behind. This permitted me to understand an upsetting reality. His legs were on in reverse. Whatever was holding my hand It wasn't human. I snapped my hand away from him, staggering back, prepared to run. We should go inside the congregation. John. He went to confront me, and I shouted. The grin had developed and bent the elements of his face around it. His lips were finished around his eyes, such countless teeth in a jaw that bended at me. The terrible smiling thing went after me. I turned and rushed down the way I looked back to see the thing behind me, following me, strolling at that equivalent off-kilter pace, strolling with those wound legs. I can see you, and the tree limbs caught at my garments, tearing at my skin as I pushed through them, making red imprints as they cut into my face. The virus air transformed into a decayed breeze of lifeless air that pushed me back. It seemed like hours, my time in that timberland. Hours seeing that thing behind me. Hours hearing that tune. Hours battling against the branches. Nothing remained at that point but to run, away from the singing, away from the thing approaching me. At the point when the radiance of my home materialized, I was going to fall. My window, my grandmother's home, my place of refuge. I moved in and locked the window after me. Slithering into my bed, I pulled my bedsheets up and paused, expecting to nod off, or on the other hand, awake from a bad dream. Gradually, following a couple of moments had passed, I looked out my covers to see another shadow on my room floor. It was there, remaining external, the window. He was so horrendously distorted at this point, a living, decayed tree grinning at me through the window, full bruised eyes, and 2 red pinpricks in the middle. It tapped on the window with those long fingers. Let me in. I kept dead still. The finger highlighted the radio. It chortled to life. Jack, Jack, John, Jerry. Come out, Jerry. Emerge. You'll be protected with us. Jack, emerge. His voice. It was so off base. It made me debilitated. Come to the congregation. Open the window. Open the window. Open the window. Disappear. The radio burst into a distraught serenade. Open the window. Pin the window. Watch you sleep. Oh, pin the window. Pin the window. Disappear. It halted. Briefly, at some point, you will leave the window open. Also, I'll slither in and I'll recall what you did. I'll compel you. Recollect as well. Open the window and I won't hurt you. It stood, dead quiet, pausing. A tune came from the radio, a similar tune I'd heard in that woods, from that cavern. We should chime in. Jack. A terrible series of creature clamors and screeches reverberated from the set. A lady in torment, a man chuckling, all while the singing is terrible. It was all a particularly horrendous clamor. My ears, they were being damaged. Someplace from higher up, through that dark bedlam, I heard a voice calling down. Jack? Jack, is that you? What's happening? The commotions halted. A frustrated voice came from the radio. Devilish wail. No misrepresentation of fellowship left. You will not be anything. Nothing. You know where I see you in 10 years. I see you fat and grimy, balancing by a noose in your own room, since you were such a great deal of disappointment. Presently, I was simply crying. Just simply disappear. Please, go away. Let me come clean with you, Jack. The world is shocking. It is vacant and dim. Eventually, it won't considerably make any difference on the off chance that you accompanied me or not. The voices began to blur, as did the shadow on my room floor. You'll see that, Jack. That's what you'll see. My room entryway flew open as my grandma came in. She embraced me, yet didn't let out the slightest peep. She remained close by till I quit crying and fell asleep. That evening, I had a horrendous dream. Something was holding my hand and hauling me through the forest. To To that cave, profound inside the woodland. We headed inside, and I saw the wellspring of the singing. There were many youngsters, generally exposed and fastened, lying on the cavern floor. Their mouths went all over. Every one of their chains prompted an opening in the cavern floor. As I gazed into the opening, my curved dad arose out of the profundities and went after me. I was shocked and alert, attempting to move away from that cool hold. It turned warm, and I saw my grandma's face in the first part of the daylight. My grandma had nodded off in her seat adjacent to my bed. She was holding my hand. Consistently after that, for 7 days, she would remain with me. She wouldn't ask me what occurred. It was like she recently comprehended. I could at no point ever hear from my dad in the future. From time to time, I'd be watching out at the trees verging on our home, and I'd see his face among the dead trees, grinning at me. At some point, you will leave the window open. After whenever I first stuck the window lock, so it couldn't be opened. After that, life proceeded. Life proceeded to hit me ill-equipped, similar to a turtle midsection side up. Living was hard. I was distant from everyone else a great deal. After school finished, I went through the absolute bottom of my life. What's more, I'm not going to carry on with as long as I can remember the story here, so I'll keep the subtleties, however bad it was. Once in a while, I could nearly hear him. You know where I see you in 10 years? I see you fat and filthy, balancing by a noose in your own room, since you were such a great deal of disappointment. Or, this is whenever I'm first conceding this to anybody. Yet there was a second I accepted the words I heard that evening, that I planned to wind up in a noose. Through everything, in any event, when I went out, my grandmother would call me. She'd ask how I was doing. Also, I'd tell her I was okay. I'd lie on the off chance that I said I didn't feel like a washout, having my grandmother as my main companion on the planet. However, it helped me through the week. I traversed a ton of weeks on those calls. It was about 15 years after the fact, or 780 weeks, when I got the call. It was her PCP. She was debilitated. She'd been taken to the town clinic and was in a coma. I arrived soon. It was there, on the white emergency clinic bed. My grandma let me in on reality. I was an offspring of assault. Her little girl, my mom, had been 15 when she met my dad. He was a man, confided in the town. She confided in her like an uncle, so it was not difficult to bait her into the trees, where he would pollute her. For a very long time later, my mom said nothing. It was just when it ended up being excessively self-evident, when she started to show, did she separate and converse with my grandma. My grandma needed to call the police. However, my mom implored her not to. My dad was a shocking man. She swore he would track down her, even in jail, even in death. There was a trepidation so terrible in her. She was unable to talk appropriately. She said he had guaranteed her he would deal with her child, that he had a spot in the forest for them to live in. Against the tears of her girl, my grandmother yielded. They got hitched. The wedding occurred in an E-void church in the forest. For the following 4 years, my grandma didn't see her girl. At the point when she did, it was abrupt. She was bringing basic foods when she saw a body lying close to the edge of the timberland. My mom was still alive, yet scarcely. She had lost such a great amount in that time. Such a lot of hair, 60 pounds, 3 fingers. However, she actually had me. She held me firmly like a little life vest. Grandmother needed to pry her fingers open to get me some food. Throughout the following couple of hours, my grandmother attempted to get out however much she could from her unfortunate girl. For a portion of 10 years, my mom had been kicking the bucket in a bad dream. She wouldn't discuss where she'd been, just murmur about a congregation. She was broken in every last bit of her soul. Hands down, the smallest flash, had still lived in her body toward its finish, the flash she had used to escape with me. She left him when he called me by some unacceptable name. My grandmother at long last called the police. She locked every one of the entryways, shut every one of the windows, and let her family rest in harmony without precedent for years. It was just later she'd get familiar with the genuine degree of the monster her girl had gotten away. The police had tracked down a cabin in the forest. My dad's congregation, such countless bodies, such countless kids, all stripped, all bonded, all dead. They were emaciated, yet not all had passed on from starvation. Their chains prompted a dull pool where they found my dad drifting, bare and grinning at them. They shocked him. My mom could have constant bad dreams. My grandmother would wake to track down her mumbling in her rest, discussing how terrified she was of him. The bad dreams she had of his carcass remaining outside her window, requesting to be allowed in. Close to my 5th birthday celebration, my grandma figured she could have been improving. She had become calmer and more cheerful. There was feeling about her that her enduring was about finished. On my mom's birthday, my grandma brought home a little cake to celebrate. She found her girl swinging from the roof van. She told me of how defenseless she felt that day. All her assistance had come so late. She had made up stories to manage what occurred. She realized she shouldn't have recounted to me that story. The narrative of the Nightmaker, my dad's story, it had been her approach to adapting. She didn't realize it would have impacted me that way, how it would scar me. She said she was upset about everything. I took a gander at the one who saw her girl's attacker every time she saw me. I took a gander at the ones who had no great explanation to raise me, to not leave me on the planet. I kissed her on her brow and said thanks to her for having adored me. There was so much I didn't say. How often she saved my life. However, I trusted it was sufficient. I held her hand and remained with her till the day she kicked the bucket. After 3 weeks, I would rather remain silent about this spot we're naturally introduced to. It's a particularly terrible, horrible spot to live in. The world was horrible. However, my grandma worked everything out, such that it was a lot more splendid for me. Her eyes resembled 2 pinpricks of light in unlimited haziness. The world is frightening. That is reality. Try not to lose trust in one another. Now and again, it's the main thing keeping each other alive. Try not to lose your altruism. Try not to lose your spirit.